So first and foremost, welcome to this BFA conversation. We're extremely proud of all the students who are, John Jenkins is here, of all the students who will be with us and presenting today. And I wanted to let you know that, that this video will be recorded so that family and friends and community members can see it in the future, and we can share your great work with them as well. So today we are here with, I am Kari and I teach in ceramics in the first year program and the grad program. And we have a wonderful guest, Donna Shoemaker, who is here with us. Thank you, Donna. It's such a it's just such a wonderful thing that CCA is having these outside respondents with us so that we can get some good perspective on the student work and have an outside voice during this experience. These are in lieu of having openings because of our COVID happenings. I've had the beautiful experience of doing many of them, and they're always wonderful and a good place to connect. One of the ways in which you can connect with the students, whether you know them or not, is to write comments into the chat. The chat will be saved, and you can write anything that you would like to. Unfortunately, today we do not have the time accessible to us to have an overall discussion. So after each person, of which there are 4, presents their work to us by sharing their screen on Zoom, for about 10 minutes, then Donna and I will have some feedback to give to all 4 of those students for about 10 minutes after that. And then while that's happening, you can write in the chat at any time. You can say something like, congratulations, or something like, please use more orange, whatever makes sense to you at the time. And you can also, if you would like to, visual literacy is always a fun buzzword at our college. If you feel as though you have an artist that you would like to relate to one of the students, please put that into the chat and they can Google it later. Those chats get downloaded onto our computers right away, so we have lots of good feedback that we can share with them. Please keep yourself muted if you can, unless you're a presenter or a respondent or a faculty member, so that we can keep the conversation flowing. Suzanne Cockrell is also with us, who is the chair of sculpture and individualized and what is now a minor of community arts. And we also have Ava Morton, who is here who's our fearless program manager. Hi, Ava. And just gets everything done and all of us artists organized during the crazy that is life. So thank you, Eva, and thank you so much, Suzanne. All of your students are amazing. I've had the chance to work with them this semester as the teacher of senior projects. We will have 4 students presenting, as I mentioned, Joel, Mel, Annika, and Nikki. I will be keeping time and make sure that they are able to present, and we might go over a little bit because we're starting late, and my sincere apologies for that. I also wanted to briefly give the agenda. So we are going to do a land acknowledgement now, and then we will have, again, 10 minutes per student and 10 minutes of response, and then we'll have some closing remarks. And Suzanne Cockrell has kindly offered to have some closing remarks as the chair of our wonderful students for this BFA conversation. I'd now like to offer the following land acknowledgement. California College of the Arts campuses are located in the Ho Chin and Yelamu, also known as Oakland and San Francisco, on the unceded territories of Chochenyo and Ramashtish, Ohlone peoples. We recognize the historic discrimination and violence inflicted upon Indigenous peoples in California and the Americas, including their forced removal of ancestral lands and the deliberate and systematic destruction of their communities and culture. CCA honors Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future, here and around the world. We wish to pay respect to local elders, including those whose lands from which you are joining us virtually today. If you are unsure of whose land you currently reside upon, we deeply encourage you to look at nativeland.ca. And thank you so much for doing that and being a part of that with us. Now I would like to introduce Joel, who is an excellent student and in our class and sitting right over there. Hi, Joel. Well, somewhere.
Hi, everyone. How's it going?
Hey, Joel.
And Joel, do you mind sharing your screen with us? And again, I encourage everyone to put notes and ideas into the chat. Does anyone have any, before we begin, does anyone have any questions or items that they'd like to address?
I'm wondering if I should introduce Donna.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Donna is here with us,
Yeah.
Shoemaker. And Suzanne, please introduce Donna. And I'm sorry if my script is off.
Oh gosh, don't worry about it. I'm so happy to be here as interim chair of Individualized this semester, and I got to work with most of you right before lockdown. So I'm really happy to see you again and also see what you've been up to over the last crazy years. I'm really excited to welcome Donna Shoemaker here today to be a respondent. Donna is a colleague of mine. We went to CCAC together in the early 90s, and Donna studied architecture and is an architect today. She studied at the University of Pennsylvania. And then she also has a fine art degree in sculpture from CCAC from 1991. She's also been writing and working in public art over the last many years. And today operates a really successful boutique architecture practice in San Francisco that specializes in the design of interior spaces that translate the unique story of the community into a functionally built environment that serves them. So I feel like Donna has a really incredible skill set of working interdisciplinarily across design and fine art, and also thinking about sort of space and also community, thinking about art and design in community context. So welcome, Donna. Thanks for joining us. Joel.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and welcome, Donna. I will put Donna's email into the chat so you all can explore her work. It's absolutely amazing. And Joel, thank you so much for beginning, and thank you, Suzanne.
Yep.
Hi. Cool. So should I start now?
Yeah, perfect.
Hi, I'm Joel Lithgow. I'm an individualized major here. I came in as graphic design, spent some time in glass, industrial design, and I ended up mainly doing kind of print and sculpture. This is me making some paper. I grew up in California mainly, in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I was raised all over the US, but I spent time mainly here. I've always been that computer guy and wanted to spend as much time on the computer doing creative things as I could. So a lot of time in Photoshop and Illustrator and 3D modeling programs, and actually starting out in an architecture program. A lot of my influences come from just the things that I grew up on, Destiny, Instagram, reading a lot of books, mainly a lot of sci-fi. This is a video game that deals a lot with just aliens and technology and kind of our, just exploring different concepts between the merging of those two things. And the lore goes really deep, and it's just, I've noticed today, even though I don't play it anymore, a lot of the concepts still come up in my work and how I think about things. Nicholas Lamos is this, I guess, an assemblist or a sculptor that I've been really interested in recently. He talks a lot about ecologies and how, and our the human relationship to those ecologies, and specifically technology as well. He writes a lot of poetry as well every now and then, and just, I guess something as frequent as this that I see on my Instagram feed definitely influences a lot of my everyday thoughts, just as frequent as it is. Olivia Baxter is an artist that I've just been really taking a lot of inspiration from form-wise. I'm obsessed with cell phone towers and construction machines and all these different intricate, a lot of machines that are just have so many different intricate parts together, and make up this full body of more of like an ecosystem of its own, and the necessity for each one of these little parts carrying vital organisms and water, in Olivia's case, around from each part. A lot of sci-fi books, and specifically this series called The Sprawl Trilogy by William Gibson, and really talking about not just about AI and kind of the agency of technology, but also expanding that to different things like technology and money, just as an idea. And this idea of like a hyper object, something that's kind of uncompressible in ways that we understand things, but have agency on their own, these kind of further abstracted entities. And this was kind of my first introduction to viewing money as something that lives on its own. And I've been applying that to a lot of different things that I see and interact with nowadays, specifically technology. So some of the art that I've been doing recently has to do with different cyberspace worlds, digital worlds. This one's a Minecraft server that's been running for the last 17 years, I think, or it's like one of the longest running ones out there. It's the same world. It's got no rules or repairs to it. And so every now and then people try to take screenshots and a map of the entire thing to see the kind of impact that players have had on the environment over time, and just to gain that sort of knowledge on it. And so in this piece, I recreated my own map using all these previous maps and images of in-game structures. It definitely looks crazy and incomprehensible, but there is a sort of like mapping that goes on. It's a big 8-foot by 8-foot piece. And something that I've been doing with it now is putting it outside and letting it deteriorate, and then coming back, finding newest images of maps that people have created and layering it on top of it. So it's kind of an ongoing record. This piece is a painting I've done recently out of stamps, and with the TV film suspended on top of it. I break apart a lot of old technology and just kind of use them for different parts. The stamps are actually made out of, or made from, different pieces that I found inside of printers, TVs, and mainly a lot of household objects. And I found that TVs are made up from anywhere from like 3 to 7 different films, and they all reflect light in different ways. And so I've used that on top of this piece to kind of give a more holographic effect, something that kind of hurts your eyes and makes your eye cascade like way more frequently and rapidly, and kind of hurts too, as if you've been staring at a computer for way too long. I've been exploring sculpture, more assemblages of all these other parts that I've collected. I've found a way that I can reuse the same screws that they were made with to reassemble them into these figures. And finding more pallet wood, just rusty rods, anything I can kind of around me, and then recreating these new figures. This is all paper pulp and screen printing ink that's been left around campus as well. So a lot of recycling and gathering. I've been getting into weaving, although I'd say I'm more of looking at it from a print media perspective. Just looking at so many images on the internet of what's going on in the Ukraine right now with the Russian invasion, and just the obsession of the kind of satellite images that have been shown of these Russian convoys. And it always feels really weird to look at an image through my phone that's taken of a satellite that's in space in a safe spot, and these like seemingly layers of safeness to this very crazy image and crazy event that's going on too. And even though it's they're like big, massive war tanks and meant to cause a lot of destruction. At this point in time, they're also still just on the road, slowly moving. There's no one really going after them. And just the weird dissonance I get from looking at those images. And so I created this out of, I wove this to kind of use the material aspect that weaving usually give of warm and comforting and kind of like the looseness of it all, but then to tie it in with a really serious image. It's about 9 feet long. This is one of my newest pieces I've done with a friend. We've been doing a lot more things together, and this was for the Fluid Mutualism exhibition on the SF campus that they had a couple weeks ago. And we used a bunch of photos from the CCA archive to build to kind of replicate the place of the open campus within the space of the SF campus. And so we wanted people to be able to sit inside of it and kind of view the whole thing, almost like a 360 or a VR world. I've been getting into painting more now, thinking less about prints and the multiple or using multiple and just kind of using them as tools to create a singular image. And so this one is where I've been stamping and then painting with ink and then sanding it back off again and kind of building up layers that way. And in that same sort of recycling aspect, well, we reuse all the studio scraps that we have. And so these were receipts from an old project that I then collaged back into another landscape, and it's got a TV film on top of it too. And the image is actually made up of, made of the form of ASCII, which is when a bunch of little letters and characters make up an image. And then with the TV film on top of that, you kind of they become more shapes because of the holographic effect as well. So then translating those things into other visuals as well. So that's some of my work. I've got a couple shows coming up. There's one May the 13th down on Broadway, the next stop, that's being put together by a bunch of students on the open campus. And so I'll be showing some work in there. And then the last Wednesday on the open campus, which is next week on Wednesday, we'll be showing that garden campus piece again in the library. So if you're around, definitely come check that out. And this is a video of a time lapse of us installing the garden campus. So that's been me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I appreciate it. So Donna, I'm curious about your thoughts around the work and anyone artists that came up for you or suggestions for Joel.
I think that I have to admit it's a little hard to tell from the weaving of one of the pieces. I can't quite see it because it's very small. But like I think that the layering of the different technologies onto each other is interesting. And so where is the weaving aspect of that?
It's all one weaving, essentially. I've been using a machine called the TC2, which is essentially a digital loom.
Okay.
And instead of choosing weft patterns and going the whole kind of weaving craft route, which I'm not a weaver, I would consider myself more of having a print background. With this machine, I was able to throw the image straight into it and let it decide what goes up and down and kind of do it that way. So it's less about the weaving aspect of it. And that's why I kind of had a harder time in how I wanted to categorize this piece as a weaving or a print media piece, because I think I do view it more as print media.
Yeah, that I think one of the things that resonates with me about it is that it appears to be beautiful to look at. It just does a the depth of the black and then the white. It's just something about it that has that beauty to it, and yet it's this horrifying image, and not in the graphics of the image, but in the knowledge. Oh wow. Yeah, see, and that's in the foreboding of what is to come. I think that's the part that, and I always think that combination of using of an imagery that's difficult and then a beauty in the object making is a really interesting way to do that. Yeah, this would be great to include in your visuals on the site. Maybe it's there and you just didn't show it to me, but yeah, so that's very interesting. And then I don't know, in terms of people, I have to admit I'm let's see, then there was the ones that are fuzzy. I'm friends with Jim Campbell, and he's done work that's been photographic layering of things on it, and so he comes to mind. And then also in the using the computer to generate the imagery through an interpretation, which it sounded, I couldn't quite follow the big collage that you've been working on over time. It seemed as if that there was an aspect of that. So I think that's basically, and I was curious about the 3D, you called it the visualization or something with the Oakland campus being surrounded in 3 dimensions, that creates a virtual reality. It was kind of interesting to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely grew up using a lot of, and understanding a lot of kind of tech jargon. And I think that's worked its way kind of poetically into a lot of how I understand forms and different things.
And do you see, I was really curious about your referencing to the games, because do you feel like the mythology, some of those games have a lot of mythology to them. Do you feel like that's influenced your work? Because that seems really interesting.
Yeah, without a doubt. And even as I was trying to find an easy one link fits all kind of description for the site, I was finding that there was no good summary of kind of the biggest lore elements, or even just an overall understanding of the lore that's gone on in the game and how it's impacted me. And I realized the only way that I can really explain it fully is if you just have to play the game and for like months and years do all the missions and then like absorb it all that way. And it's without a doubt something that's impacted me.
Because it seems like that would be an interesting avenue to follow further. I don't know if it's making a game or being more explicit in the reference.
Yeah.
I've had conversations with people, and I'm not a person who has done that. I didn't grow up in that time, but I just find it so interesting because it is, like you say, it's a myth making, and there's conquest. I don't know, there just seems like there's a lot of rich material there, and particularly if it's been so significant to you, it seems like that could be an interesting thing to investigate.
Yeah, I recently got excited because they had started putting out more job listings for the company, Bungie, that made this game, that are specified just on being essentially a Destiny historian. And so you know all the lore, you come up with the characters, and kind of more taking an archival, but looking into the future with it as well. And I thought it was just a really fun way to approach the whole world building thing as well, and incorporating it with art and character design and storytelling.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, I did see a show in LA which were all artists' creations of games, which was a really interesting show. I'd have to look that up to remember what that was. But so there's always that you make your own games. Oh, and then I was kind of curious about like your relationship with Bitcoin and EFT, like making art in that world seems like a natural.
Yeah, it's
place for you to go.
It's definitely something I'm interested in. I definitely was on the cryptocurrency train when I was in sophomore year of high school, going on gambling apps with my friends, trying to get 2-3 Bitcoins, and we would lose
Oh,
them.
wow.
And we'd go back to it. And then, looking back on it now, we're like, whoa, that was so much money that we were just like,
I know.
yeah. But then at this time, what it's becoming into now, I definitely understand the technology and influential and the amount of impact that NFTs are going to have.
Right.
But at this point right now, they're nowhere near kind of what even a minimum viable product to achieve those sorts of things. And so it's been interesting watching it all play out. But I'm not gonna fight it, but I'm not gonna totally engage myself in it yet, because at this point it is a lot of scams because the technology is just not foundationally there yet.
Okay. Well, yeah, and some of it is just the issue of your own branding and identity through these mediums. In a way, maybe thinking about it like you did when you were a sophomore in high school, where it's a game. But I think those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
Also, it's exciting.
Donna, thank you. Those are very insightful. I also was thinking about this piece in itself as being immersive, and how the one that's on the screen now, and Joel, how you might be able to create more environments, because you're speaking about site and then you're creating a site specific installation. And I think that's using the technology that you are known for, which is a lot of photo and a lot of gray. I love gray. So I think that's, it made me think about a couple of other artists. You had mentioned Olivia Baxter, who's beautiful at creating intricate forms, just lovely. And William Gibson, where you're taking in literature and science fiction, which I think also is kind of what I picked up from Donna's comment. How do you bring cryptocurrency or these other currencies and visualize them in your work? And your work is commonly abstract and has a formula that is both insanely precise and loose and and vague at the same time, which I appreciate. The other artists that came up for me were Richard, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering his last name, Mizrach. Suzanne, do you know, is it Mizrach? What do you?
Mizrach, Misrach.
Mizrach, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I tossed him into the chat. And then Trevor Paglin too, who thinks about site and conspiracy and the way that technology is affecting us. So I think those might be two good people to look at in terms of how they're presenting their work, because the Trevor Paglin, I have one of his books and it's just lovely to look at. And it's also very, it's really demanding of you intellectually. And I think that's where your work could be going as well with the research behind these projects. The design of the projects themselves, especially 2B2T, is that what you call it?
Yeah, it's the server name. It's actually stands for two builders, two tools.
I'm intrigued by the idea of the map, and I would encourage you to continue pursuing the map. And also the scale of this 8x8 is fantastic. And I think, yes, exactly. So those types of photos do your work justice. And I appreciated what you said about it's, I found it to be both clean, and also you said you wanted to make work that hurts your eyes. And while malicious, it's excellent. And if that's the outcome, this does hurt my eyes. So I would continue with that, the frequency of these pieces. And then I think the Jim Campbell's a great idea. Donna, that was that was wonderful. And then also thinking about if you can with the, again, with the gazebo, what makes for a 3D or UR world that we can experience firsthand. Your work is all, I can recognize that at this point, which is really nice, even though it's taking different forms. So you can absolutely continue playing with the forms. I would encourage you to do that. And yeah, and thank you so much for sharing this with us. It was an excellent presentation, and I really also enjoyed all of the references that you had come up with, and the format itself.
Thank you.
Donna, any other comments? Anyone, or Suzanne? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to just jump in a couple things. I don't know how our time is, but really exciting to see your work again, Joel. And from 2 years ago, wow. And I love the scale. I love your critique of digital media, and also the quality of beauty that you bring to the work is also has a kind of mystification. I think that's really sophisticated. You know, I look forward to being in front of this work, you know, rather than seeing it on Zoom. And I also think that you really, you make us work as a viewer. And I think that's really exciting. You know, you talk about world building. You know, I loved the scale. I got to stand inside that garden piece. That's really, really super well done. And the experience of being there and moving around the space was, you know, it was both centering, you know, in a way, like to be in that round space. And it was also thinking about the garden space on the San Francisco campus. It also brought up all kinds of other kinds of references of like loss and displacement. So I think you have a kind of skill with being able to generate a kind of complex reaction. You know, I think looking down on that woven fabric was really also a great choice to be able to look down on it, because it gives us a sense of being sort of like the makers of the world, you know, and that's our game board. So we're put in the position of being the ones who are sort of creating that, deploying, you know, and sort of, you know, the way that the guys would stand around the table, the war table, you know. You know, so I think there's so many great things to talk about in this work, and I really appreciated the critique of the dissidence and dissonance and the scale. Really, really exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
And again, just quick reminder, everyone, you can always write in the chat at any point, and give comments to Joel, suggestions, ideas, comments, short stories, whatever makes sense for you. All right, so next we have Mel.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen really quickly. My name is Melissa Rodriguez. I'm an individualized major with a focus on fashion design and textiles, and I also have the ecological practices minor. Just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Cali, Colombia, to a Jewish household, and I was really inspired by the female artists in my family. My grandma had a very large interest in fashion, and she had her own company, and my aunt was not only a visual artist, but also a musician, so I grew up like between that. And then also something that I really appreciate about my culture is the native Hawaii textiles and prints that they make. This definitely put me on like a fashion path with all of the colors and patterns, and it's something that I really appreciate and enjoy. And in 2015, I immigrated to the US with my family, and I was able to study in an art school in Miami, which led me to CCA after my high school journey. As for recent inspirations, I have this fashion, they're like an independent fashion brand. They're called Above. And I really love their shoes, especially I love how crazy and out there they are. And also I really appreciate how this company treats, or like how they made themselves stand out from the rest of the fashion industry. Especially I have a lot of interest in sustainability, and the fashion industry, we all know it's not very sustainable, but they make 30 pieces of their shoes, and like everything is very small collections and small items, so they try to always not mass produce their products. And another artist that I really enjoyed is Lara Soto. She is a mixed media sculptor, and I really like her. She does like this process journals books where she experiments with color and new materials and how she combines everything. It's kind of like just looking at her way of thinking through projects, and that's something I also incorporate into my art practice. Oh, whoops. And then the last one I have for today is Dasha Pleasant, and she's a microbiologist artist. Love everything she does with bacteria and how she explores texture and color, but also it's really cool that she's kind of like collaborating with this micro organisms, so it's really nice to see. And today I'll be presenting my thesis project, which is intertidal patterns, and I decided to make it a capsule collection. Just to talk a little bit more about it, I took a class at CCA called Bioart and Design, and that really led me to what my whole thesis is about. I was able to work with bacteria, and that influence the colors, forms, and textures of all the prints and patterns that I was going to have in my textiles. And I also referenced a lot of oceanic creatures because I really appreciate how beautiful they are without having that mindset of our society, which is really rigid and like there's only one or two standards of beauty. But if you go to nature, there's like everything is beautiful and it's just so broad and you can take so much inspiration from it. So this is the process journal that I did for my project. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about fashion, it's just all to the end result, to the clothing or the dress or whatever, but there's a lot of research behind it, and I'm a person that does a lot of iterations and does a lot of mood boards, and that's how I explore concepts. This is just a couple of close-ups of the pages that I did, and then after I finished that book, I transitioned into bigger boards to further do textile explorations, or I took photos of the bacteria I grew and like played with color, as well as like sew samples for shoes and different drawings of the lasts. I don't know if you guys can see my screen. Oh, there you go. And then, yeah, this is another example of what I did. And I put the boards up into my thesis exhibition as well. And these are some of the textiles I created. I do a lot of 3D work to kind of like experiment my further developments for the collection. And I have some of the bacteria that I grew, which the blue and yellow one and the middle one ended up being the direct kind of like drawing I did for one of my bigger prints for my collection. And I also worked a lot with bioplastic because I didn't want to use plastic for jewelry or for earrings, and I wanted to incorporate it with the shoes, but I realized I didn't have the right equipment or a lab to work on that. This is more of like the bioplastic samples I did, and I started combining it with fabric, and then I realized that that started making sense in that way, and in the future I really want to keep exploring that concept. And from that I transitioned to digital prints. So I have this couple of versions and this one's too. And then finally, my final outfits, I printed and designed all the textiles. I also dyed the tights, made the dresses, the jewelry, the shoes, which was a really fun project to do. This is the first project that I was able to take it from beginning to end to actually make the pieces and be on the photo shoot and direct my models. So it was a really amazing process to be part of. And I have 3 outfits in total. This is the last outfit that I did. I love playing with colors and textures, and I definitely think that it translated into my collection. And then I asked my models to do like a group photo shoot, because I really feel like even though there's so much color and pattern, they somehow really work really well together. And that's basically my presentation. As for what I'll be doing in the future, I'm prepping for the fashion show that's coming on the May 13th. So it's really soon. And I really want to start my own brand after graduation. I want to work as like the independent brand that I showed. I don't want to be part of the fashion industry and mass production. I want to work in low, like more unique quantities of shoes or garments that I make. And I did start it as a fashion design major, but then I transitioned into individualized for those same purposes. I feel like my type of work didn't fit that rigid fashion industry world that we have right now. Yeah, thank you so much for coming and letting me share my work.
Excellent, Mel. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your presentation. And I think one of the things that comes up first for me is this idea of how you are connected to the native, and am I saying it, Wayu textiles? And I see that coming throughout, being placed throughout your work, especially in respect to the color. Yeah, and even the red background on here, this is a solid choice. And your attention to the shoe has always been right there. Can you explain a little bit more what the shoe means to you and how that developed?
So sorry, I forgot to mention it, but I've always been really inspired by shoes. I feel like once you put a shoe on, it completes your outfit and it pulls it all together. And it can give you, like, I don't know if it's only me, but it gives me some type of like empowerment of myself, and it makes me feel really confident. So I really wanted to do shoes. TCA didn't have a shoe major. That's why I went into fashion, but then I realized that I couldn't make shoes, only clothing, and then individualized was the best option for me to kind of like explore all that realm.
I think that's really smart. And one thing that we haven't mentioned before is that all of the students presenting today are individualized students. And the joy of that is seeing how they're combining different disciplines at CCA in respect to their interests in order to create these new types of work. It's of great value to SM, especially as being interdisciplinary on a whole as a college. So Mel, I applaud you for doing that and doing you for these works. The other thing that you had mentioned was your ideas around sustainability. And I appreciated that transition between the bioplastic pieces into digital prints. I thought that was a nice transition for you. And can we scroll back to those really quickly? Yeah. And these, so you say that they're 18 by 20. Oh, and
Yeah.
You said they're 18 by 24. How do you envision these types of work being shown within your practice?
So for example, the one left corner to the screen, it ended up being the textile I created for the boots. So I made it a repeat pattern, and then it's the one that goes around for the shoe. And then the bacteria I grew the blue and yellow. I went through multiple iterations of them, and then I tried to make it a textile, which then I realized that I liked more purple, and then it ended up being the outerwear piece as well for the textile created for the shoes.
That's wonderful. I love those transitions. That's really working for you, and they're so custom that way. Is there a reason that why you chose the or what was your thinking behind the size and for the dress and the shoe?
So for the dresses, I decided to put all my models in a very simple dress because I didn't want to take away from the shoes and from the tights. I think through the tights and the shoes, I was able to explore form, texture, and color, and I didn't want the dresses to take away from that.
Excellent. I also appreciate your documentation, this close up, and then there's one other close up where the model has a hand. Yep,
Yeah.
the one on the left. I think both of those make for a unique portfolio.
Thank you.
And Donna, what were your thoughts?
I appreciated what was the word, sustainability, just watching the two directions and investigations, and I appreciated seeing how it all coalesced at the end. I think I was sort of immediately struck by the person I would think of for you to look at is, I think it's Oxan Architecture, Oxan. They had a show at SF MoMA. I don't know if you saw it just recently. She's a brilliant woman who worked at MIT, and she's made all these amazing discoveries, like taking shrimp casings and putting it into a 3D digital machine, and it becomes a building element. So she's very directly trying to find sustainable products, and they're not at all immediately practical, but it's just looking into that direction. And then she also created fashion as part of her investigation. So I just think you would like looking at her work, and she's quite brilliant. So interesting person to know about. Yeah, so and then I know the other thing was it was a little bit like it took me some pondering. This one, for example, I can definitely see the relationship between the original, what is it, bacteria that you grow, and then this. But one thing that I appreciate is that there's an accessibility to the fashion. It's obviously completely unique and one of a kind, and thereby special, and only people who purchase it have it. But at the same time, it's in some ways can be very accessible because they're basically fairly simple dresses, right? They're just tights, and there's simple elements, and so the beauty of that is it could actually be very easily distributed into the, like anybody could share in having it, possibly. So I guess that's something you have to think about. You were talking in the beginning about mass production versus not mass production. Is that, and that's because of the waste of mass production?
Yeah, I don't see myself like mass producing whatever I decide to make, shoes or garments. There is not only problems with waste and the environmental impact, but also the garment workers and the unfair treatment that they have. So I would like to have control of my own waste and my own production and keep it very in-house.
Yeah, well, because of course, well, then what happens is they become very special. It's high couture or whatever you call it, right? Because it's only for the people that can afford to have you make it. But yeah, I totally understand the concerns. Yeah, it's interesting. And then I liked the the collection, it's certainly, it's colorful and playful. I think there's a playful element. Does that seem fair? And at the same time, easily understood. So that's good.
Thank you.
There's a little bit of a gender bending thing going on the last one, which I enjoyed, because there's something about platform shoes that has always sort of been a part of that culture. So I thought that reference was interesting. I once attended, platform shoes have a whole history to them.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I went to this play, a Moliere play, and everybody in the thing was wearing these incredibly outrageous platform shoes. So yeah, they're a definite statement. There was one other thing I was thinking that would be great for you to see. I can't think of it now. Shoot. Oh, I know that in Toronto they have a whole museum to shoes. Really fascinating museum.
Yeah.
You know a bit?
Yeah, I really want to go. Someday I'll go, but
You
yeah.
should totally go. It's quite a place. I went to a fascinating exhibit there about turn of the century women's clothing and all the ways it killed you. It was amazing. Yeah, it's quite a place. So yeah, fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in too, and just say thank you so much, Melissa. It's so great to see your work. And, it's really exciting. And I remember this from jumping into some of these conversations a couple years ago. I mean, that's really the thing about Individualized, and, that you bring all a kind of skill set that you bring from design into this like fine art, sort of exploratory context, and you bring those skills with you. And it's just great to see how that continues to live in your work. Like Melissa, I also saw that with Joel's, but so I just love the design boards and the journals and the way that you are sort of organizing this material for us to see it. And so much of it was just kind of so exciting visually, and I also sensed a real kind of pleasure in the way that you were sort of putting and making that work. And, there's something also about, so I just see the whole process of going from these sort of beginning sort of studies in biology and this sort of excitement around this bioart course that you took, and the way that you led that through a series of iterations and processes, really exciting. And then there's something about, I love the heels, for sure, of the shoes. And there's something also groovy about the tie-dye. It definitely feels like it has a kind of Northern California vibe to it as well, a little bit. Also maybe Japanese a little bit too. I'm just curious, like, what are some of your fashion influences?
I think my biggest fashion influence is Iris Van Herpen. She kills it every time. She works really close with biology and nature, and I want to get to that point or experiment with it in the future, because they do a lot of like 3D printing and assemble dresses that way. It's really sculptural. It is not something you can wear out and about on a regular day. It's like a wow factor piece, definitely. So excited to experiment with that more in the future.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your artworks with us. We're getting feedback. And I think the one last comment that I have for you right now is that it might be beneficial to think about the forms of your of the pieces that you're making, and take some of the cues from the science that you're saying from biology. I was noticing some of the undulations and folds in that last work around the sleeves. So that might be a good next step. And then obviously thinking about potentially collaborating with someone from the sciences that you can find locally and share slides with, or have a little session with. It's always enjoyable in ceramics to partner with a geologist or an architect in the same way. So that could be fun for you. And thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much. I really appreciate everyone's feedback.
All right, next up we have Annika. And Annika, if you don't mind sharing your screen with us.
Yeah, let me do that.
Am I in the hallway right now because of the feedback? I am.
Okay, can we see that? Are we good?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, cool. So, hi, my name is Annika. I'm currently in Oakland, and some of my interests, like outside of art, are making friends with neighborhood cats and baking and like food science and things like that. I really developed an interest around art from picking up like how to draw books of like your favorite cartoon characters or that kind of thing. This Pokemon book was a book that I owned, and I think it's still in my sister's closet at our parents' house. So in this like blurry picture of me holding a Legoland map, I was probably around that age when I started drawing out of these books, where it would just be like start with a circle and like don't forget Pikachu's cheeks, that kind of thing. So I came to CCA for illustration, but I think as I developed like conceptually, I moved away from that pretty quickly. Within the past few years, I found that music and music lyrics are my main sources of inspiration. I'm really interested in the ways that musical artists and songwriters are building narrative within like 3 to 5 minutes, and how they're stringing language together to create meaning. So here are excerpts of some of my favorite lyrics. In this song from Pokemon Heroes, I really attached to like the notion of fantasy and imagining better places for me and my loved ones to live in. Thinking about like the desire to figure out how to get there, that sort of thing. And grief and death are huge influences on my life. When I was 5, my Lola died, and as I got older, I realized that the initial grief from that experience really framed and continues to frame my interpersonal relationships now and my relationship with myself. So Janet Jackson's Together Again was really pivotal for me, like probably sometime in like my teens, because now I could think of, I could envision my death as reunion, and I could remember that the love that I share with the dead was and is always here, like it was never gone. And I had that realization when I learned that ancestral veneration was always an option for me, and I could learn more about myself and my heritage through that. So I really consider fantasy, grief, family, yearning, and again, ancestral veneration as like huge parts of my practice and my life in general. So thinking about all of that, this piece was made after someone in my family died. It was during shelter in place. And at the time I was really considering like the ambivalence of grief. I was processing my own grief and watching my parents grieve, and all of that was really, really difficult. But at the same time, I was really consoled by and happy because of the fact that my family and my family in the Philippines could get together over Zoom, and we could, reminisce together and pay our respects together, that sort of thing. And I understood that the grief that I experienced at 5 was pretty similar. Like I was navigating loss the best way that I knew how, and I was watching my parents grieve. I was watching like my extended family and grieve and stuff like that. But it was also the first time that I can remember going to the Philippines, and it was the first time that I could remember meeting like my much larger extended family. And I was just consistently reminded all the time that we came from somewhere, even if that wasn't how I was articulating it at age 5, like that was what I was learning. And a lot of those memories still give me joy. So if anything, like this piece is a reminder that multiple things always exist at once, and I can hold all of these things within myself without conflict. I think a lot of it was about like making peace and trying to process like my inner strife over having these feelings. And also during shelter in place, I made a lot of books. I really turned to bookmaking because it was the most like accessible thing for me at the time. This is like early 2021, I think, like February or something. And it's really small. It's maybe like 3 by 2 inches, and it fits like really well in my hands. Writing was appearing more and more in my work. I started like exploring written language and like handwriting and things like that. And this book was really about like forgiveness and my own agency through my appearance. A lot of people were like changing my life at this time, and also I think I spent like a good portion of time sabotaging myself, and I finally found like the wherewithal to confront that. So that was like really exciting for me, both in my practice and just also like as a person. And at the same time, I was like revisiting a lot of children's media, like all the children's cartoons that I watched when I was a kid. I was really thinking about like the messages that they had. And it kind of registered to me that like all of these cartoons really fed me as a child. And I was thinking about the ways that I starved myself coming into adulthood. Because so much of what I consumed as a kid was like about community and friendship and helping each other towards a common goal. But as I grew older, like, you know, I was constantly comparing myself to other people because I was terrified of competition and other things like that. But anyway, I include this because at this point I learned that books were like the perfect intersection of textiles and like kind of printmaking for me. I was really invigorated by the relationship between a written language and like soft, sensuous material, especially at a time where no one could touch my books. I was really tackling the question of like, how could I convey this tender vulnerability and all of my feelings like regarding what I was thinking about. That question definitely carried into my senior show, which was all about the connection between grief and water, and like the different forms that grief can take. I was kind of asking myself the question, if grief is water, then like how willing am I to swim in it? You know what I mean? This all kind of came out of a writing that I had done for Angela Hennessy's Death by Death class. I talked about how I feel and see myself like floating in a vast body of water when I really actively think about my grief and when I try to communicate with my ancestors. This first piece is a lithograph, which is a process that requires constantly wetting a stone. And it was really imperative to me that all of the work use water and also my writing. But you know, whether that be through dyeing the yarn or doing something like lithography, where you have a sponge in your hand like the entire time. So here the lithograph is submerged in some water, and the water kind of like slowly seeped out into the fabric over time. So if you saw it on Tuesday, it would have looked different on Thursday, that sort of thing. I was really thinking about like directionlessness, if that's a word, control and the lack of control, the passage of time, the embodiment and saturation of grief and being alive. I found that this was really exciting for me in terms of seeing how my work was changing over time. I don't think that that was really something that I had considered before. I feel like before I was just considering the process, like the record of time, like through the process, but not when the work was on its own and displayed. This next piece titled, I was weaving this and thought of you, I finished weaving this and thought of you, I wove this to think of you, was accompanied by a small cloth that had some of my writing on it. This weaving was about a lot of things, and I went through a lot of things weaving this, but I had a really good time doing it. It was, I think, really about how water and grief are like such shapeless things, and I think that to me at first, like, they're both seemingly illogical, or like they refuse to follow a logic, and this weaving was really about how, like, I was born into grief considering the history of my people and considering like my own personal history, and how like my body can give grief a shape or a form even for the brief moment that I am alive. And I think it was about decay and celebration and like the overwhelming nature of all that I was tackling with this show. All of this work was like a really, really fruitful experience for me. And I felt like I gained a lot more places to explore, again, not just with my practice, but in my life in general. It felt really, really fulfilling for a lot of different reasons. And I was pretty happy after the end of it, which was kind of surprising for me, I suppose. But they're all things I want to keep thinking about after I graduate. And after I graduate, I really want to keep weaving. Like, I don't know how to convey that weaving has like really changed my life. I really fell in love with both weaving and bookmaking. And so these past 2 years of school have been like just really productive emotionally, I think. I'm going to keep learning about what weavers have been and are doing in the Philippines. That's really important to me. Figuring out how I can dye things without school, things like that. I want to keep learning about natural dyes. Like, I got into some indigo research this past year, and I was using indigo like for that weaving that you saw, that sort of thing. As for other goals, like, I think I was gonna say short term, but that's not true. Long term, I just want to keep baking, and I just want to keep wanting to be happy. Yeah, I don't think I have many other plans than that, honestly. That's kind of it for me. But you can look at this picture of this weaving that I made for my parents over winter break while I thank a bunch of people. I thank everyone who's here with me now in this Zoom. Pretty cool. Big thanks to my family for having confidence in me, and to my ancestors for watching over me. Huge thanks to Professor V and Michael Washington for their guidance. Many thanks to the textiles department for embracing me the way that they did, because seriously, I think weaving made me a way better person for myself, and I'm like way more excited about art moving forward than I was 4 years ago. So like, huge thanks to them. Finally, lots of thanks to my friends and all my peers for helping me have fun, and I hope that we keep finding joy together even outside of school. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And what a delightful ending to that also. It's amazing how long you'll stay friends with all the people that you get to work with today. I mean, right now you can see Donna and Suzanne are on this call, on this Zoom call. So it's really important, and I'm glad that you shed some light on it. Thank you so much for your very thoughtful presentation. All the artists that you, I mean, just as your teacher, all the artists that you listed, the structure of your presentation, how you got down to explaining to us things that were in your artist statement, but in a genuine and true way. I believe your story and the behind the scenes of your art making are really just so important to know and to understand. And it's a vulnerable place to be in, to say, I have grief, and here are the ways in which I have that, both you know, from your ancestors, and then personally. I think that's really, I'm really proud of you to be able to share that information and guide us through the thought process of making the work. It also, I think when your work is genuine, it begins to show up very clearly in the pieces themselves. And I applaud you as well for including process shots within that. So the indigo piece that was in the bath, that's, oh yeah, exactly. Or on the loom. I think all of these process shots, I would definitely encourage you to keep including in your lectures and in your presentation of materials to others. And additionally, I would encourage you to think about fantasy and where that comes into play. And maybe that is potentially from some authors or things that you're reading as well. So those could be woven in, dare I say, and and so I would I encourage you to keep thinking about those and getting some quotes or figuring out how you can, yeah, just incorporate that. I did have one quick question. How did you choose the indigo in that one piece, the Born into Grief?
Yeah. So I had weaving with Josh Fott in the fall of this year, and he kind of did like an overall indigo thing for our class. But I found myself really attached to it just because I really love the color blue, if you somehow couldn't tell. And I did like more research about it, and so many cultures use indigo, like since the beginning of forever. And it was used a lot for like Filipino weavers would use it, or like a lot of Filipino cultures also used it for medicine and things like that. And so I was kind of thinking about that. But I still wanted to keep learning about it.
I think that's fantastic. And I think it can be incorporated into your artist statement so that we can enjoy that fact as well. And this was my favorite piece, by the way. It's incredibly strong. So yeah, please keep doing this. Donna, thoughts, ideas?
I think it was really interesting, the water and the grief pairing for me, because it made me think in that I think of water as ubiquitous and surrounding us and in us and all around us. And I tend to think of grief as a moment that passes, and then, but it is all around us, ubiquitous, so it was interesting for me to think of those two things together and make that connection, both in the way that water is life affirming, it gives, and grief maybe does too. So I liked that, thinking about those things put together in that way. And then in terms of a person, I think Chanel Miller had a show at the Asian Art Center, and she's a graphics person, and her process is amazingly moving in writing her way through a very challenging situation. And she does it so eloquently. So, and then I actually like her people, and her graphics are just, it seems like you would get something from looking at her work. Yeah. So those were the primary things that I thought about. It's interesting when you were talking about indigo being medicinal, because you're healing with your work. And so that seems like it fits in nicely.
Mhm.
I think those are my primary observations. But yeah, it's all beautiful. And weaving is so amazing, because weaving can be so many things. Weaving can be tapestries, and it can be, I'm an architect, it can be a facade of a building. It can be so many things. So that there's a lot of directions to go, even in that place.
Mhm.
There you go. And there's so many beautiful weavings can make space, which you've done here. which is, like Actors Ball. So there's so many wonderful potential directions for you. That's exciting.
Annika, I just wanted to thank you for a really, I think, quite a powerful presentation, actually. So many things that I really appreciated about your language, and how articulate you are about difficult human experiences and processes. It feels like I felt something transformative in yourself, but also in the work, that something happened for you in the making of this work that is really palpable. And I think that that's what's the power. It's something very powerful. That's what I meant by powerful, right? There's something palpable about something that happened for you that's also happening to the material that I also felt, so it was really, I was just really noticing how your words and your work felt to me, how they rested inside me, and how your words really facilitated that. So that's a kind of something special, actually, being able to speak really eloquently about things that are deeply felt and not often talked about in culture. So that's super exciting. And I think that baking, I love the presence of baking in this presentation too. There's something also, alchemical in baking, and the way that things, ingredients and the way things rise and come together. I thought that there was also something interesting there. So, sensuality, honesty, tenderness, I felt like you sort of led us through your work in a really exceptional way. And yeah, I just really want to thank you. There was a real confidence in you that I felt and really appreciate, not only in your language and your presentation, but the work itself. I love this piece too. Keep weaving. I love that you talked about joy. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, nicely done, Annika.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
And thank you to everyone who's also commenting in the chat. It's nice to see those, and please keep doing that. Yeah, and good work. Yeah, that's right. Good clap, Katie. So, oh, Andy, hello. Yay. All right, so we have Nikki is up next. And hi, Nikki. All right.
Hello.
And Nikki, do you mind presenting with us for 10? And we'll give you some feedback, and you can go ahead and share your screen with us whenever is good.
All right, let me just get this ready to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Let's see. Oops. All right. Can everyone see this just fine? All right, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki Menig. I'm an individualized major. And some 2 fun facts about me. I'm from a small town in Illinois called Marengo. And my house is surrounded by corn. That's kind of all I've known. But I live like 40 minutes from Chicago. So I was able to have that duality between country and city life, which I really appreciate. Another fun fact is that I am a twin. I have a twin sister, and she also studies art, but down in Chicago. And she really was the person that influenced me to pursue art. But before art, I wanted to be like a famous singer or dancer. That was like my childhood dream. And these dreams that I had kind of all came to a standstill after what I would call my quarter life crises. It started right after I graduated high school, and my life was kind of thrown up in the air between college or not college. And I was just not sure. I was like, what am I going to pursue? I have no idea. And I was watching my friends and like trying to see what other people, I wanted someone to tell me what to do because I cared so much about what they thought I should do, that it threw me into like self-doubt and anxiety and depression. And it was a really low point of my life that I've ever been. But looking back on it now, it's also the biggest experience of growth in my life. And it really made me face my demons and to become closer and kinder to myself. And to the fact that not everything's going to happen in a linear fashion. And even when everything seems lost, it's okay. Like you'll get back on it and you'll be better for it. So my art really deals with that kind of transition. And I want to go into influences first before I go back to that. So a big influence of mine is music. It is heavily influencer on my stuff and my art that I create. So when I'm making art, I have to be listening to music, and I'd rather listen to music than talk to people, because I really look for rhythm, movement, and emotion within my music that I can translate into my art. So I'm trying to get whatever I'm hearing in my ear down into the paper. And because of that, I listen to a wide range of stuff. It'll go from like vampire clubbing music to like 80s Japanese city pop. It all depends on my mood and the mood of the piece, but it greatly impacts my artwork. And then another influence is text. It's really just text I can find anywhere. Mostly I find it on Pinterest and Tumblr of all places. But I really like the personal narrative that text can give an art piece. And it makes it so personal and interwoven between the artist, the art, and the viewer, that it just makes me feel way more tangible and connected to pieces. So I really want to convey that within my own work. And then the third influence is design and color. Like studying saturation is very important to me, especially with knowing color theory and its emotional and psychological effects and what it can portray. And I'm always, in my work, you'll see I'm between two styles, which is similar to these two artists, where it's like bold, bright, and kind of cartoony-ish. And then it will go between like gothic, bold, and tight styles and colors. And I always battle between these two within my work. So when I started at CCA, it's not going, just a second. Oh, wow. Okay. When I started at CCA, I was an animation major, and I was only really focusing on the bold and bubbly side because I thought that's what people wanted. I was still stuck in this thought process of I have to market myself to everyone, and what I want doesn't really matter as much. But in my free time, I would still explore like this gothic side that kind of dealt with the more twisted, complex emotions that I wanted to explore and deal with. So one was kind of I was putting in front of myself, and the other I was hiding, and I didn't really want to show anyone. But as like I went through the process of like understanding myself and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, I started trying to interweave these two and bring the one from the back to the front. And I wanted to show it and display it, even though it was terrifying for me. I really wanted to do it. So I started presenting it in classes and making it the class assignments. And I got like great reviews from it. Like I thought people would hate it and see me differently, but people loved it. So I'm like, I shouldn't even listen to myself. I should listen to myself. I should know that this is good. And no matter what I make, people are gonna like it. I just gotta find my group of people. And even if they don't like it, it doesn't matter. So for my senior show, I took that a step further from just the classroom to outside into the public gallery. And I was displaying animations and illustrations side by side that really dealt with my inner conflict, which was another step for me that was terrifying, was showing my thought process and these kind of disturbing little trains of thoughts that I had that I just had to get out, and I wanted people to see because I wanted to take up space and just connect with the viewer and be known. So this animation was just kind of like sitting with me and knowing like how much I question myself. And sorry, my buttons are not working correctly. Sorry, this is what you're supposed to be seeing. So I split up my gallery space into two sections. The U&I is the one with the animations and dealing with people. I wanted them to come sit with my animations, and it's kind of like we're having a conversation between the two of us. So I'm using my art to represent myself, and it's like such raw emotions I usually keep with myself. I want to put in the forefront. So that was one of the animations that were on the TVs. And then this was another one that kind of was diving back into the bold coloring, but using like this macabre twist on it, where it's sometimes I'm my own worst enemy and I just want to like hack my head off like sometimes. So it's kind of like an imposter syndrome and self-deprecation, but in this like bold and funky color. So you kind of don't know what to feel. And like, I don't either. So we're in this together. And then the other section of my show was my illustration thesis, which is a comic called Memento Mori. And this is diving back into my animation side of character building and world building, but this time in a comic. And it deals with Dante's Inferno. So I have my main character going through this mansion, and every floor is a different floor of hell, like in Dante's. And they're chasing this mysterious character who ends up being the devil through it. And this was really fun for me because I kind of threw all of my cares and worries, what other people thought, to the wind, and was like, I'm gonna make something that I would read, that I want to do, that deals with like these cool characters that are kind of mysterious and kind of hot in a way. And it's not happy, it's kind of like disturbing and sad, but that's what I want to read and that's what I want to do. And making this has been so freeing in the sense that I'm making what I want to do and it doesn't feel like work, and I'm like not worried about what other people think. And the process has been insanely difficult, but it's really fun. And I'm just happy that I'm at a point, especially graduating now, that I'm more confident in my ideas and that I'm having fun with it. And it doesn't feel like I have to impress anyone. I'm kind of just making my art for me. And that has always been the goal since I started and just wanted to pursue art. So where from here? I definitely want to travel. I want to travel abroad, but I also want to look at internships. I'm not sure where yet. I was definitely looking at animation studios, also looking into illustration places in New York, but where from here, I'm definitely not sure. The path is not laid out, and I'm kind of finding myself back where I was when I entered CCA, like right after my high school graduation. And it's kind of ironic and funny to me, but I want to treat it as I understand myself more, and I have that experience of not knowing what to do, and it ended up finding my way anyway. So I'm not trying to worry as much this time and just kind of seeing where life or fate takes me and having fun with it and not trying to freak out. And in the meantime, keep making art that I love and it's personal to me. And hopefully like I'll find other people that love my work as well. And then I just want to say, thank you for everyone listening and taking the time to come out and look at my art and listen to me speak. That's all I have to say. Here's some information if you want to keep up to date with me after grad, see where I go from here.
Nikki, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah,
it was really great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Something that I noticed, and I had the pleasure of seeing your work throughout the semester, what always stands out to me is the bold coloring that you've been using in works that you had mentioned highlight certain, yeah, exactly. Certain emotions. Oh, exactly. And you're right, it is dark and there's a humor to it. And I think both of those things together, that dark humor, it's so great in your work. And I would love to have you pursue that. The pink, actually, if you scroll back a little bit, there's one pink one called Suffering. Yes, that one was also, I would say the one on the left has, with the pink, has a subtle suffering to it, whereas the one on the right, and obviously the characters are in there too, but it's a lot more in your face, it's a lot more aggressive. Oh, and there's blood, right? So alongside the blood, there's an aggressiveness. And so I would say those are, I think those are Self-Devour and Suffering I think are really good pinpoints for you. And keep making things in those two veins. It seems so you. And I really appreciate the colors that you're tossing in there, and the drama that the colors create. What you mentioned too about challenging yourself was really nice, and please keep doing that. It's very self-aware to say, instead of doing the easy thing or just completing the assignment, I'm going to challenge myself, I'm going to go the extra mile. And you really get it, it's clear that you get a lot out of that. And it's not always the easiest thing to do at the end of the day. So I applaud you, and I think you absolutely have to keep doing that. And I also suggest finding, when you had said at the end that your goal is to make art for you and to keep creating, I suggest finding, work on personal projects, connect with studios, or maybe have a small business. I suggest finding like-minded artists in the field, and I'm sure you have started this already, but continue to build up that network so that you have people to talk to about these ideas. And that is a perfect Google spreadsheet to start. And we could talk more about applications too, in our remaining time together, not in this presentation, but in class. And thank you again for a very, very thoughtful and thorough presentation. Good work.
Thank you. I appreciate all the words and advice. And an honor.
Let's see, Donna or Suzanne, thoughts about
I had a similar, I liked the two that you talked about from 2020. Those seemed super strong and a unique voice in a way, somehow the strongest to me. And the complementary colors of the red and green one, and the way she's just like looking straight at you, it's very confrontational. And then they're totally different. You've created totally different moods out of the two different aspects. And I think obviously graphic novels is a direction, but I could also see it'd be interesting if there was a way to tie back to your music, like if they were, I don't know if album covers exist anymore, but something in that vein, because there's so much emotion and pathos expressed on these that they definitely have different moods. Like I could see them going with different kinds of music for sure, which I thought was interesting. And in terms of the intimidation about bringing out the dark side, I mean, the thing that's amazing is, of course, everybody has one, right? So I think that the beauty of when you show something that so strongly expresses it, it maybe makes us feel less guilty or something. Like we're not the only ones that have these dark, self-deprecating thoughts. So I just would applaud that continued effort. And then again, in the way that it's like the one on the left, you could almost look at it and it's kind of normal. It's more subtle, but there's something about them. I have to say, I really like the crazy lady with the green eyes, but yeah, so kudos for that. And then, yeah, it sounds like you have the directions for next steps. I think those are my two thoughts.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's funny you said album covers. I recently started like trying to dive into that and see
Well,
how.
it's always
Yeah.
amazing to me how past passions, like I'm sure there's a whole story there with what happened with music.
Oh,
Past
yeah.
passions, they don't abandon you. They just take breaks.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's perfectly said.
Oh God, I love
Oh.
that. I thank you so much, Nikki. I really enjoyed that presentation, and I really appreciated the humor that is just underneath your self-deprecation, and kind of they go together well, I think, in your work, and the humor. I was also thinking, I wonder what she was listening to when she made these, like what you were, what was on Spotify or whatever. And, I was thinking about like this, because there's something about, the everydayness of like these kind of voices that we carry around with us, and I thought about the comic strip. I mean, newspapers don't really have them anymore, but I thought about just like single comics, that you could thinking about a daily practice, like moving forward as you move away from school, like creating these kind of, either a one comic, like a one image with a quote, or like a short strip that is like a series, because there's something about the way you carry yourself. I mean, these characters look like you, and so so people get interested in you, not only your characters, but they're interested in how you're digesting the world, and I thought that could be also something really interesting to think about, because it's already sort of present, at least in, I haven't seen your animations. I'd love to see them actually too, but just some of the images and some of the personal works you showed.
Oh, that does remind me of the other thing I thought of, which is TikToks. I don't know if TikTok is still the same,
Yeah.
but like there are little crazy animations like this.
I thought the same.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still cool, but
Yeah, that's funny. I recently started trying to do animations on like Instagram's version of TikTok, because I don't have TikTok, but I did one short animation on Instagram and it got like so much attention. I'm like, okay, maybe this is where I can like put my animations in and kind of see how people respond to it in a way.
Totally.
And I wish I could have shared my animations that I was playing on the TV, but I couldn't play them for some reason through Google or InDesign, so I apologize for that.
No worries. Hopefully I'll get to see him one day.
Yeah, definitely.
Nikki, thank you so much again. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And you have some really nice comments in here in the chat. Thank you also to everyone for coming today and spending your time and your extra time on this presentation with us. Joel and Mel and Annika and Nikki, you made this so special, and it's just wonderful to see the work and see what's coming out of CCA, and specifically to see what's coming out of the individualized program. And Suzanne, thank you again for joining and commenting. And obviously, Donna, thank you so much for joining us. It's just a delight to have us be all together, even though we can't be physically together. And I think the insight to me, it's really helpful, and I hope that I know that all of the students will take your advice and move forward in their practices with it. It feels as though these conversations get to be a jump start into what's next, as opposed to a shutting down of what was. So thank you for that. And Suzanne, as chair of Individualized, did you have any other, and Donna also, do you all have any other final closing comments for our students and our audience?
I can just say mine very quickly. It's very inspiring to see what everybody is doing and then also all that you've clearly learned in the past years of your CCA education. So it's and heartwarming. So thank you for sharing it with me.
I just feel really lucky to be able to see your work and to see really the kind of incredible value that Individualized program offers students, and I feel like in each of your presentations, I really got the sense. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I just realized my video was off.
Just in all four of your presentations, just really appreciating the in-depth of inquiry, the materiality, and it's just the interdisciplinarity of your work. I'm really glad you found a home in Individualized to keep making your work. And bridging media and disciplines, it's not easy to do, and you really did a great job. But I'm just excited to report back to the faculty. I'm so happy to be here and see your presentations. Really great work. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. Thank you again, Ava and Donna and Suzanne and all of the students. Also, thank you to our class for being on Zoom yet again for the third week in a row and showing your support for your fellow students. And thank you for creating really good presentations. Every single one was fantastic, and you followed the template and you included artist references, and I'm just overjoyed by the learning outcomes that have been implemented. So thank you. And Donna, we will follow. I will share your information with the students, and we'll follow your work and see what you're up to next, and maybe offer a critique if you ever need one.
Okay.
I'm smiling, by the way. I'm just wearing it. Okay. Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Kari.
For your time.
Thank you for hosting.